Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue our conversations with respect to those recent releases being made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2020. And in particular, I'd like to focus our attention on that which was given spine number 1033. And this is from 1928. This is a film directed by Edward Sedgwick and starring Buster Keaton. This is a film which is called The Cameraman. From 1928, and it stars the one and only Buster Keaton in what is a charming, exciting comedy that is also very touching, very romantic, and also filled, as the great Buster Keaton films are, with so many physical comedy set pieces, so many gags, and also a lot, and I say a lot, of almost death-defying stunt work that is captured on screen in displays of extraordinary displays of physical comedy from Buster Keaton. And these displays of physical comedy are even made more extraordinary by the fact that we always have to remember that he is displaying these acts of physical comedy, and sometimes they're very dangerous looking. He is doing this in order to do one thing, which is to entertain. He's doing this to try to entertain us and to make us laugh and to make us smile. And what a brilliant film this is, therefore, for a lot of reasons. And you look at some of the set pieces and some of the physical comedy maneuverings that are on display here. And if you haven't seen this film and you're watching this for the first time, I'm so happy for you that you will be able to experience this wonderful work, which is still to this day, as I say, very funny and very touching, very moving, and with a lot of nice character set pieces, as well as the comic set pieces, to show us a film that is also a good story. So this is the Buster Keaton film, The Cameraman. And this film, as many of you probably know already, comes in a very interesting and peculiar period in Buster Keaton's career, his silent film career. So as I say, this is from 1928, and this is the first of the films which will be known colloquially by film historians and by film fans as the MGM period. And so the MGM period is the period of films where Buster Keaton was under contract with MGM Film Studios. And so his films from this point onwards, during this short period anyway, would be with the film studio MGM. And a lot of film historians and Buster Keaton fans and experts point to this period of the MGM films as being a different turn, if you will, in Buster Keaton's career, because for a lot of people, these were films that didn't necessarily showcase the full range of talent and creativity that Buster Keaton obviously has. And instead, the films were limiting Buster Keaton's creativity to the point that he was slowly but gradually becoming diminished in terms of what he was expressing on screen. And so for a lot of people, a lot of historians, the MGM period is considered to be a period that isn't necessarily reflective of Buster Keaton's total, full, and complete cinematic creativity and genius. However, we do have a film that was one of the, well, it was the first in the so-called MGM period, which is The Cameraman. And so for a lot of people, the film The Cameraman, which is right here, represents one of the last cinematic expressions of Buster Keaton's total comic genius. So it is for a lot of people a representation of one of the last times Buster Keaton would be able to experience total or near total artistic and creative freedom. And in that respect, I think The Cameraman is seen to be, in terms of the film, of course, it's seen to be a very entertaining Buster Keaton comedy on a lot of levels. But also in terms of Buster Keaton's career, it is seen as being maybe one of the last great Buster Keaton silent comedies. And because it is one of the last times that we will see Buster Keaton in his cinematic, artistic, creative glory, as it were. And in that case, I think, or in that instance, I think a film like The Cameraman is very important to be able to watch and see in the context of Buster Keaton's his films. And so I'm very happy that this film is being made available like this in the Criterion collection. As I say, it's a really lovely film that holds up very well. If I could say just one thing, and I totally understand the context in which this particular part of the film is being made. There is a particular sequence involving the depiction of Asians or Asian Americans. I'm not quite sure exactly which it is, but characters that maybe are secondary characters of Asian ethnicity. And this is one of the parts of the period, I suppose, in terms of depictions of these characters and people of Asian ethnicity are depicted in a certain way. And so we always have to remember these depictions and the context to the extent possible when we're watching films from this period. And so I very much understand that this might be seen as being a little bit dated in those depictions when we see a film like The Cameraman today. But just keep that in mind if you are approaching this for the first time. Again, it is a somewhat jarring depiction for, I think, some people might say it's a bit of a jarring depiction of these characters. And so it is a small but memorable sequence of the film in terms of a lot of action and a lot of stunts and a lot of comic set pieces from Buster Keaton. So it's one of the more famous sequences of the film in terms of a sort of a climax, not a climax, but in terms of an action piece. But just keep that in mind if you are watching this for the first time. So there are some depictions which might be somewhat uncomfortable watching today. But once again, this is from 1928, and we do have to remember that there was a kind of trend, if you will, of depicting certain characters and certain ethnicities on screen during films like this. And so is it good or is it bad? Again, that's not the point of my comment here, but just keep that in mind when you're watching this film. But overall, I should say that it is still a splendid work, and when we focus in on Buster Keaton's art and craft when we watch this film, and I mean his cinematic proficiency, his timing, his stunt work, his real understanding of physical comedy, and showing us that so lovable Buster Keaton cinematic persona when he is doing his thing, or when he is when he is interacting with the other characters and the love interest and things of that nature. It really becomes an overall lovable depiction of a film that is still exciting, still funny, and still marvelous, and still awe-inspiring to watch and experience. It's a really great addition to the Criterion collection. This is the film The Cameraman, again, directed by Edward Sedgwick, and starring Buster Keaton, which is the beginning of the so-called MGM period. And speaking of the Criterion collection release, we have this Blu-ray here, and it is a splendid release. This is purported to be based off of a new 4K digital restoration of the film, and it looks great. And it also has score designed for silent film, and it's a new score which is described on the back as having been performed for the first time 2020. Timothy Brock. And so for those of you who want to have a new, fresh, exciting score to listen to as you watch this, this is, I think, a really nice addition. And for those who don't necessarily watch, or when you don't listen to scores when you watch silent films, you can just turn down the volume or something of that nature and watch it silently. So it's up to you. This film, I would say, also really works so well when you watch it silently, and there's so much activity, and it's so easy to follow. It's very clear in terms of its story trajectory, and so either way, my friends, however you want to approach it, I think it's up to you, and I think you'll have a really good time either way. But that's not all, because what we have on this Criterion release are a number of supplements. And let's just go through those one at a time very quickly. So the first is a commentary from 2004. So this isn't a new Criterion commentary per se. It's excellent, though, and I'm so happy that Criterion included it, or was able to include it, as part of this release. Once again, this is from 2004, the commentary is, and it's by Glenn Mitchell, who is the author of A to Z of silent film comedy. So he is a silent film comedy expert and an expert in Buster Keaton. And so when we watch this film with the commentary by Glenn Mitchell, we can hear little stories about the production, some stories about the background with respect to Buster Keaton's career, and as I say, how this film is an MGM film, and how that started to affect Buster Keaton's habits and his daily workings in terms of his filmmaking, and also little stories about the production itself, the story, and little details that Glenn Mitchell is particularly fond of in the film, and that sort of thing. And therefore it becomes yet again another source for those of us like myself who really are looking for more ways to learn about this film and Buster Keaton. And so this is a really great commentary to include. So this is the commentary from 2004 by Glenn Mitchell. And then that's not all, because as part of the supplements we have a whole film which is included here. It's another silent film from Buster Keaton, also directed by Edward Sedgwick, and this is the film that was made after The Cameraman. So this is another MGM film, or a film from the MGM period in Buster Keaton's career. This is Spite Marriage. Spite Marriage, again from 1929. And this is a really wonderful thing, because this is, again, described as being based off of the 2K digital restoration of that film, Spite Marriage. And it's included as part of its own separate supplement. And not only that, we also get its own separate optional audio commentary, which is also from 2004, which is by Jeffrey Vance and John Bengston. And I'll speak about John Bengston in a separate, with regard to a separate supplement in a moment. It is another great commentary track to another great film, another Buster Keaton film. And the commentary track also gives us further background and context in this film because we understand, based off of the comments of the commentary participants, that in many ways the film Spite Marriage is also marking the beginning of the so-called end, if you will, of Buster Keaton's creativity. And we see some of this in the film Spite Marriage, at least as described in the commentary track. However, I do also want to emphasize that this is still a film that has a lot of the charming Buster Keaton traits, and it has a lot of great set pieces and a lot of great Buster Keaton comic details that make it shine and make it really lovable and a real treat to watch. And so it's nice to have the cameraman as the feature here, and then have Spite Marriage also included in this bundle. So you're really getting two films for the price of one, if you think about it, which is a really awesome deal, I think. Now, I should say that this film Spite Marriage, it's interesting that it was in its own supplement, or it was included as a supplement rather than, say, a film that would either have its own individual release, or maybe it was a film that could have been assigned a spine number, and maybe it could have been released as this on this Blu-ray as the Cameraman and Spite Marriage or something like that. You know, we've seen combo packages like that where you had each of the films designated with its own spine number, and they've been in one release, but they've been designated their own spine number. We've seen this with, for instance, the Coker trilogy released from the Criterion Collection, also the Jackie Chan films, Police Story 2. So we've seen examples of this in the past. It's very interesting, though, that we don't see the similar type of treatment with respect to Spite Marriage and the Cameraman. Again, we have seen in the past films that have also been, let's say, released on Criterion Collection and then having a separate whole film as a supplement. I mean, we have seen that. An example coming to mind is, for instance, the Hitchcock film The Lodger. When that was released by the Criterion Collection, it's still available. And as part of the supplements, it has another whole film by Alfred Hitchcock, Downhill. But the film, that separate film that was a supplement on that release, wasn't given its own spine number, just like here with Spite Marriage. And so we always have to wonder, could this have been a situation where Criterion could have released Spite Marriage under its own spine number, or maybe in the same Blu-ray, but just change the marketing or change the title of the Blu-ray to say maybe Buster Keaton, MGM Films, The Cameraman, and Spite Marriage, and then give Spite Marriage its own separate spine number? It could have been. Again, I don't know what the situation is in Criterion with regard to these kinds of decisions, and so I really can't say. Either way, of course, we do get the film Spite Marriage as a supplement, and I would suggest also maybe another way of putting it, and which is what I was trying to suggest earlier, which is this could be, in the long run, maybe a good thing. Again, I don't know, because I'm not sure as to pricing as well. Maybe if this had been marketed as being two films with two separate spine numbers, maybe that could have caused the release to have a slightly higher suggested retail price or something. I'm not sure. Maybe the fact that it's just, I mean, we're getting the Cameraman, which is in and of itself a great thing. But if we have Spite Marriage as a supplement rather than as the main attraction, as it were, maybe that means that this Blu-ray, as it's marketed and as it's promoted, maybe it's seen as just one film with supplements. Therefore, it is given a certain suggested retail price accordingly. I don't know. Maybe it can affect pricing. I'm not sure. If it does affect pricing, then maybe that it is a good thing. Maybe that it's not a supplement, because maybe that can give rise to the possibility that this could get a lower price. I'm not sure. Again, I'm not sure, but in any event, my friends, however you feel about this, I do understand also the other side of it, which is it's a separate film. Spite Marriage is a separate film, and it is in many ways a key film in the context of Buster Keaton's career in MGM, so maybe it really deserved to have its own spine number. And it would have, again, given more Buster Keaton films in the Criterion collection in sort of the one way of looking at it, because as we know, this is, we have seen other Buster Keaton films. Well, we have seen films released by Criterion that have featured Buster Keaton in one way or another, but this is really the first time that we're seeing a Buster Keaton comedy in the Criterion collection. And so it would have been interesting. Criterion could have released, say, Spite Marriage, and that would have been not one but two Buster Keaton comedies in the Criterion collection, which might have also been itself its own interesting marketing tool. I'm not sure. I think there are many different ways of looking at this. And without knowing more and without knowing the full details, I can only speculate. And even my speculations, as you probably have considered right now, they're probably incorrect or incomplete as far as my own gaps of knowledge and insight are concerned. But in any event, my friends, we are getting a second film here in the supplement form. And so, in essence, we are getting two films for the price of one, which is splendid. And not only that, it has its own commentary track from Buster Keaton experts. So it's really worth checking out. You can watch The Cameraman and you can watch Spite Marriage, and so it's a nice progression going forward. And it's really easy to do so because they are nice. They are just, once you see The Cameraman, you just have a feeling of wanting to watch more. And so I think the next one that people might want to watch next would be Spite Marriage. So the Criterion Collection release, however way we look at it, it still includes the film. So I think that's really wonderful that we have two films included in this. So this is Spite Marriage from 1929. But that's not all, because then we have a documentary. Again, this is from 2004. So this isn't a Criterion documentary per se. It is fascinating, awesome, and essential viewing. This is from Christopher Bird and Kevin Brownlow. And it's called So Funny It Hurt, Buster Keaton and MGM. Approximately 38 minutes. This is a film that goes into more detail in documentary form about Buster Keaton's career and MGM, and how the MGM period for Buster Keaton affected his career and the trajectory of his films as the MGM period continued on, and what that did to his cinematic persona and the films that he was making at the time, and also hit some details about his personal life and maybe reasons why he decided to work with MGM the way he did, and things of that nature. So in this case, this documentary, if you haven't seen it already, is also incredibly informative, highly recommended, and essential, absolutely essential. Again, this film, The Cameraman, is so significant in Buster Keaton's career for a lot of reasons, one of which being the MGM connection. And so we always have to understand this. And I think with an understanding of this situation, I think we can further appreciate the high level of excellence that is going on in this film. And so this is a great documentary. I'm so glad it's being included here. Again, from 2004, So Funny It Hurt, Buster Keaton and MGM. But that's not all, because then we get another documentary, or a little video short program, which is from 2020, and this is a Criterion produced supplement. That's my understanding anyway, from Daniel Rame, and it is called Time Travelers Uncovering Old L.A. in Keaton Comedies. And this features John Bengston and Mark Wanamaker. Mark Wanamaker is a silent film expert, and this documentary, or it's a little video short, if you will, it's essentially John Bengston taking Mark Wanamaker on a tour of certain sites in Los Angeles, and locations where some of Buster Keaton's films were shot. And so John Bankston, who is himself a Buster Keaton expert, is essentially taking him and us on a tour of some of the locations. And also we see John Bankston's interview, and he talks about his method and approach. He talks about his love of Buster Keaton films, and John Bankston talks about how he approaches Buster Keaton films, how he then looks at the films, some of the corners of the frames, all the little details. He looks at aerial photographs to try to engage in a detective work type of research to discover exactly where all these locations are that we see in Buster Keaton films, which is absolutely extraordinary. This supplement from the Criterion collection, Time Travelers, is extraordinary for a number of reasons. First, it is extraordinary because we see John Bankston, who is himself a Buster Keaton fan. He is an expert. He's also a business lawyer, which is very interesting. And he describes his business lawyer or lawyer background as somehow helping him or assisting him with his approach and research, because it means that he is always trying to search. He is continually trying to search for things and always continuing to ask questions. And I find this to be very fascinating. And it shows, it really shows his attention to detail and the way he's paying attention to these little things in the screen or on the frame of the silent films. And Mark Wanamaker makes point of this. He marvels at how John Bankston pays attention to something that was, for instance, a house that was reflected in a shot of a car's mirror. And so that sort of attention to detail led John Bankston to be able to discover the sites and locations of where Buster Keaton shot many of these famous sequences, including many of the sequences to be found in The Cameraman. And so this is so extraordinary for that reason. Also, it's extraordinary because this is a great way for us to see just how much a film fan and historian and expert like John Bankston really loves Buster Keaton. It shows. His love of Buster Keaton films really shows, and it's such a delightful, charming portrait of a real fan, an expert and admirer of Buster Keaton's works. And so this is highly, highly recommended for anyone who is interested. And you also get great details about the locations, and John Bankston gives wonderful insights into how these location choices are also very significant in Buster Keaton's career overall. There is a wonderful discussion that John Bankston gives, for example, about a scene found in The Cameraman, where there's a moment where Buster Keaton runs to a particular drugstore. And John Bankston talks about where the drugstore is located, how he found it, and that is a story in and of itself, how he managed to find the location using all the clues available to him by watching the film. But he found the location, and he shows us what the location is now, and he also gives further insight into how that location might hold a lot more significance than we might realize because of its proximity to other locations of other films by Buster Keaton that also hold significance in the context of Buster Keaton's career, which makes this is an example of why this is a fascinating supplement, which is called Time Travelers, Uncovering Old L.A. in Keaton Comedies. Please check it out if you can. It is marvelous. But that's not all, because we also get a one-on-one interview conducted by Criterion, my understanding is anyway, from 2020. And this is from another great Buster Keaton expert, James L. Neibaur. And he is the author of Fall of Buster Keaton, His Films for MGM, Educational Pictures, and Columbia. And this interview is titled or subtitled On Keaton's Late Career. And once again, we are given more information. We are given a focused conversation from Mr. Neibaur about, again, more details of Buster Keaton's career with MGM onward, and how, again, this figures in quite significantly in the career and filmography of Buster Keaton. and how this affected his creativity on screen, how this affected his the way in which his on-screen persona was depicted in these films for MGM, and how it was gradually diminished, shall we say, due to certain circumstances that James Neibaur points out, and how this overall figures into the overall career. So this is a wonderful, insightful interview, and once again it goes toward the significance of this film on many levels. Once again, it's a Buster Keaton comedy, and it's a great one, absolutely great one, but it is also an MGM film, and we have to remember this. And when we keep this in mind, I think that helps us further to appreciate the craftsmanship that went into this film. And so the interview with James L. Neibaur really helps to further solidify that understanding for me, and it's really wonderful to have. So this is the interview. It's approximately 14 minutes, and so this is from 2020. A wonderful interview to watch, so please check it out if you can. And that's not all, because we also get a short, a sort of documentary short from 1979, and this is from Carl Malcolmes, and this is called The Motion Picture Camera. And according to the back, this is based off of a restoration of this short, and so it looks very, the picture quality looks very good. It's very clean, it's in color, and it's really nice and sharp, and it's essentially a documentary about 30 minutes, approximately 30 minutes, and it goes into the specific devices and cameras and machinery, specific machines that were used in the context of the early cinema. And so we see the cameras, the boxes are opened, and we see the inner workings of the gears as the mechanisms are being employed. We see how film travels through these gears and mechanisms and how it moves. And we see also the technical aspects of them in terms of the way in which the gears and the little cogs, how they engage with the film, how they press against the film, and also other technical innovations of each specific machine that is being portrayed or being featured on this documentary. This is significant vis-a-vis the film The Cameraman, of course, because The Cameraman, the Buster Keaton film, involves a main character that is using one camera or another as he is traveling through the landscape of the film. And so we see how the camera is very important to this character, and how film, putting film in, sometimes taking film out, and that sort of setup provides the basis for his character, the Buster Keaton character here. And so I think in that way we have to understand the nature of the types of camera that were available during this period. And so in that sense, I think watching a film like The Motion Picture Camera, The Motion Picture Camera from 1979, is a very insightful way. It's a great way to get a better appreciation of the actual workings, the size of these things. And again, we have many different machines that are on display in the Motion Picture Camera short, but it's just to give us a further idea as to the specific technical specifications and inner workings, and the way it looked, and how film interacted with the gears, and this sort of thing, and what the mechanism was for operating it, and how it was operated, where the viewfinder fit in, and these sorts of things for each of these machines. Fascinating stuff, absolutely fascinating stuff. And so this is the film from 1979, approximately 30 minutes, called The Motion Picture Camera. And with that, my friends, this is the release from the Criterion Collection. But that's not all, because we have also here the booklet, which is right here. This is the front of the booklet, and this is the back of the booklet. And this is a stapled booklet, which is wonderful. As some of you may know, I'm a big fan of staple booklets. They're very easy to maneuver, they're very easy to read through, and I'm a big fan of them. I understand how sometimes it's not possible. We get foldouts instead of staple booklets, but when these do arrive, I'm always very happy because it makes the reading of the essay a little bit easier for me. And speaking of the essays, we have two writings that are here. The first is a essay by Imogen Sara Smith, which is called Man with a Movie Camera. And this is a wonderful essay. I'm a big fan of Criterion's essays, and I'm a big fan of Imogen Sara Smith's work. And we have a combination of these. Her essay is splendid, absolute must-read, because she has a wonderful, clear way of writing and expressing what it is she wants to say. She talks, of course, about the film and specific moments of the film that she deems significant. And she also talks about certain moments that she personally reacts to, so it's nice to get her reaction to the films as well. And she also speaks, again, about the significance of this film and the fact that it's an MGM production. And there's a particular phrase that she uses, which I find so wonderful. On page 8 of the book, she says here, "The cameraman thus has a special poignancy. Like the last rose of summer, Keaton fought passionately to make the film his way and mostly won his battles," end quote. Like the last rose of summer. There's something so vivid about that image, and it's so perfect because, as I say, this is considered by many to be sort of the beginning of the end in terms of Buster Keaton's total creative freedom expressed on cinema. And so this phrase, I think, is very lovely, very poignant, and very vivid. So a wonderful essay, absolutely wonderful essay. Once again, this is by Imogen Sara Smith, and it is called Man with a Movie Camera. But that's not all, because we also get a second writing, and this is from the book My Wonderful World of Slapstick. And what we get in here is we get a chapter from this particular book, the chapter being The Worst Mistake of My Life. This was Buster Keaton, in his own words, talking about this period, the MGM period. And again, the point that we have here for the Criterion book is that the chapter that is included, The Worst Mistake in My Life, is Buster Keaton's perspective on the MGM period. And so we've talked so far about the MGM period. We talked about how it's significant in Buster Keaton's career. We've heard from great scholars who have spoken about it in commentary form or in documentary form, also in essay form. But now, at last, we get something from Buster Keaton himself. We got a little bit of it in some of the documentaries because there were some excerpts from interviews held with Keaton. But here we get it in a full written form. And so, and it's from his point of view, his perspective. And this, therefore, is a great way to further to really build upon one's knowledge base as to exactly how this film once again figures into the career of Buster Keaton, its significance in many ways, and how it had ramifications for his career going forward, this period, the MGM period. And to hear it or to read it from Buster Keaton himself, I think is wonderful. I mean, anyone who is a Buster Keaton fan will probably have read this chapter already. But for those who aren't necessarily Buster Keaton experts, to have this chapter included in this booklet makes it very convenient in terms of being able to access very easily, and also it's a great read. It's an absolutely great read and compelling. Incredibly compelling. Some of the details that he includes here are just wow, absolutely compelling reading. So this is a great highlight, an absolute great highlight in the trajectory, if you will, of Criterion booklets. It's certainly one of the. It's great. It helps to make the conversation that more robust and full. And it's essential too, because once again we are getting the perspective from Buster Keaton. So this is the excerpt from the book, or the chapter from the book, and the title given here is "The Worst Mistake of My Life." So this is, again, absolutely essential reading to get the perspective from Buster Keaton himself in a fully realized written form. So wonderful job by Criterion to include it in this booklet. And speaking of the booklet, and going also to the cover art itself, I should just let you know this cover art for the booklet, and also the art for the booklet, and also the cover art here, is amazing. There is this font that is used, that is employed throughout, and it has this nice opportunity for these angular approaches to the wording and to the pictures, and it's this lovely black and white rendition. The artwork, I should just let you know about the artwork here. This is let's see here. Yes, the artwork is the art is credited as being art director Sarah Habibi, Eric Skillman, illustration Victor Melamed, and I must say this is stunning. I am a big fan of this. I really like this very much. This presentation by Criterion is splendid, absolutely splendid. So we have the booklet here, which continues that motif, and I should just add finally that inside the booklet we do get some pictures that accompany the writings and also the production credits for the Blu-ray, etc. So you are getting a wonderful example, yet again, another great example of another great Criterion booklet, which is included in another great Criterion release, which is the film The Cameraman. So once again, we should remember that this is a very significant release, right? Because this is a Buster Keaton film from MGM. It is a wonderful Buster Keaton film, but it is also an MGM film. And so we, I think with that understanding, we realize that it has a lot of significance that I think can help to further appreciate how splendid this film is and how wonderful this film is. And it is also, for Criterion, it is also a Buster Keaton film in the Criterion collection, right? Again, we've had films in the Criterion collection in the past that have featured Buster Keaton, but now we have a Buster Keaton comedy, a Buster Keaton silent film comedy in the Criterion collection, which is wonderful. Again, in physical media form, which is wonderful. And not only that, as I mentioned, we are getting essentially two Buster Keaton films introduced into the Criterion Collection physical media catalog. And so at last, it is a wonderful release to have on many levels, and Criterion has done its best to give us a packed, full, and robust release, and I think it has, which makes this film, I think, a wonderful addition to the currently existing Criterion Collection physical media catalog. This is wonderful. I'm so happy about this. A wonderful film, a great film, a charming, lovely comic film that delights, that still inspires awe, and that is just a sight to behold. A beautiful example of the artistry and craftsmanship that is the genius of Buster Keaton, the cameraman. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now, and so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies. Thank you so much again, my dear friends, for your time, and cheers.